Donald Trump spoke in Georgia at the Georgia GOP convention. And as always, it was wild. And this is, of course, right after he got the news and we all got the news, or at least a couple days after, that he has been indicted federally on 37 felony counts, I think 38 counts total, due to his mishandling of classified documents, importantly, obstruction and lying to authorities, violating the Espionage Act. So many wild details. I do encourage everyone to read the unsealed indictment. A lot of people talking about it, especially in the right wing, clearly haven't read it because they're pretending it's all witch hunt when obviously the evidence is there for Trump doing the things that he's being accused of. But with that being said, let's jump into this first clip.
So you got to watch that. You got to watch it. We're all going to be watching it. As president, all of my documents fell under what is known as the Presidential Records Act, which is not at all a criminal act. Everything. It's all judged by the Presidential Records Act. In this whole fake indictment, they don't even once mention the Presidential Records Act, which is really the ruling act, which this case falls under 100%, because they want to use something called the Espionage Act. Doesn't that sound terrible? Oh, espionage. We got a box. I got a box. The Espionage. The Espionage Act of 1917. I think it was put in there about World War I boxes. And by the way, Biden's got 1,850 boxes. He's got boxes in Chinatown, D.C.
All right, so the normal talking point there, the whataboutism. But Jessiah, it's funny, and by the way, we have many more clips to look at in a bit. He has kind of just settled on, I'm not going to argue against the evidence. I'm not going to even address the evidence. I'm just sort of going to say, nah, my interpretation of the law says I'm fine.
Yeah, so, it's important to remember that Donald Trump is not like a practicing attorney or anything like that, and his relationship with the law is just breaking it very cavalierly, and then his lawyers scrambling behind him to try to clean up the mess. Yeah, even like the idea that even how he scoffs at the word espionage, espionage, it's just no big deal. Like, it's incredibly important, and there's no amount of cope in the world that will let you sweep that word under the rug, especially when you may very well have been complicit in it.
And I don't understand, I guess I do, it's called dishonesty, but if I were trying to take everyone's word at face value and think everyone was honest, which obviously is not true, then I wouldn't be able to understand how on earth these takes can be coming from, again, the unsealed indictment, from the actual evidence. There's no way you can perceive this as an honest person, as some political witch hunt, because of the stack of audio recordings and photographs, documentations of all different kinds, text message communications, testimony from his own lawyers about all of what was going on. A clear effort by Trump to effectively, not probably purposely, break the law just for the sake of it, but he was breaking laws because he wanted to keep these documents, show certain details to people when absolutely he shouldn't do that. And within all of it, he's realizing this is classified sensitive material that I'm not really supposed to be showing anyone. All of this documented evidence. And so instead they just don't even address that, pretend it doesn't exist, and go, oh, it's terrible, they just hate Trump.
Yeah, so if like you said, if you read the indictments, 49 pages long, which I know might sound intimidating, but relatively speaking, that's a fairly short legal political document, and it's a narrative indictment. So the way it's written is written for lay people like us, or political commentators, people who are not attorneys, people who basically don't have that legal background. And Jack Smith and his team lay it out point by point by point. And then when they make a claim, like on line 23 or whatever, then you have A, B, C, and D right under it in terms of citation. It's there written in plain English, easily digestible, and multiple times, throughout the course of the document, Trump admits that he has documents that he did not declassify and that he can no longer declassify and that are secret and confidential and he can't show. And then he'll follow it up with, but look at it anyway. Just like, I can't do this. This is really wrong. But also, hey, look, here you go. It's absolutely absurd.
And as the crowd's laughing along, oh, it's a box. It's multiple boxes, first of all, to be accurate. But, oh, it's just about a box. The Espionage Act, and they're all laughing. Keep on laughing when you get put into prison, Trump.
That's right. Clip. When you're wearing a suit as orange as your face, Mr. President.
And to further deter illegal immigration, I will sign a day one executive order. We're going to do an executive order day one, so important, ending automatic citizenship for children of illegal aliens.
Executive order. But more importantly, aside from the glitch, he's just saying, I'm going to try to, through an executive order or
executive or whatever. We can't even butcher it the way he did. He butchered it so uniquely.
He's just proudly and getting cheered saying, I'm going to violate the Constitution with an executive order. Because what he's talking about there is getting rid of birthright citizenship, where if you're born on U.S. soil, even if your parents are undocumented immigrants, you still are a citizen of the United States. Birthright citizenship comes from the 14th Amendment, a part of our Constitution, and he's saying, I'm getting rid of that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, I find that people in the modern conservative movement have a very unique and abusive relationship with the United States Constitution because they profess to love it above all else. It's almost like a divine document to them, except when it's not, right? Except when it comes into conflict with Trump. So whenever a Democratic president issued executive or executive order, whenever a Democratic president would issue an executive order, Republicans and conservatives threw their hands up in the air. How dare you? This is authoritarian, it's fascist, it's tyrannical. And now you have the Republican frontrunner, the former president of the United States, a man who may very well yet be president of the United States again, saying that with the single stroke of his pen, an executive order, he's going to overturn the Constitution. And by the way, not only is that just legally laughable and authoritarian as all get out, it's also really cruel. Like, you're targeting children. The whole point behind that birthright citizenship, or one of it, was it was supposed to be an act of compassion in part as well, because this idea that, the United States, at least in principle, is supposed to be accepting of all people. It's a melting pot. And if people come across the United States and have children here, the idea is the United States is so welcoming, again, in principle, that we want those children to be officially considered U.S. citizens. And out of just abject cruelty for no purpose other than to punish immigrants, he wants to try to revoke that. It's wrong on like 3 or 4 different levels.
And you would be saying and setting up a situation where an individual could be born, this is their home, this is everything they've ever known, and then the law would require that our government deport them to a country that's not their home. This is where they're born, this is their home, this is everything they know. Really cruel. Next clip here on Pence.
59. De Sanctimonious is at 13. Pence is at 6. But Pence has gone down since his last, sadly, because he's a nice person. He's trying to get nasty, though, so we may have to fight a different way. All of a sudden, you notice that? All of a sudden, you get a little bit nasty, Mike.
A little bit nasty as in, finally, now that he's announced his run for president, he's actually speaking out sort of at the intensity, not even, that you should if you were an individual who served alongside a president who tried to do a coup and tried to pressure you into allowing that coup, and then whenever you didn't, sicked a mob on you. And Pence has sort of been critical of Trump in past years since January 6th, and now is being a little bit more, which good, but still not enough, and that's nasty to Trump.
Yeah, so Mike Pence is someone that I think from moderates and certain elements of the left gets an undue amount of respect for the decision that he made on January 6th to not try to overthrow the government and overturn an election unilaterally. Very low bar. Don't give you much credit for doing that. But even in terms of his campaign, Pence is doing like many other Republican challengers to Trump, trying to walk these, like he's trying to have a foot in both worlds simultaneously, where he's trying to avoid a confrontation with Trump, trying to avoid outright criticism of Trump, while also at the same time having to distinguish himself from Trump in the primary. And so he'll do things like run an anti-Trump attack ad, which was really called him weak repeatedly. Weak, 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 the word that Trump hates above all else, but ironically the word that describes him best almost. Yep. And then he'll do that on one day, and then the next day go before a CNN town hall and complain that Trump is being prosecuted or indicted because we have the rule of law and nobody is above the law, but it's really divisive to prosecute a former president. And then when the CNN town hall host, I think it might have been Jake Tapper or Caitlin Collins, I can't remember, they were like, but wait a minute, you just said that nobody's above the law. Wouldn't that include a former president? And then you can see Pence like visibly like freak out. It's like Schrodinger's law. It's like he is above the law, but he's not at the same time. It's this bizarre thing. And so for Trump to say Pence is getting nasty, is he? Like maybe occasionally he's calling you weak, but then Trump, you should be grateful because then he'll follow it up with something very obsequious the next day. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
That moment from the Mike Pence CNN town hall, so humiliating. And I was in pain watching it because he goes, oh gosh, and his little, I've said he's a made in the lab politician that's just, or a politician machine spit him out, and it's just so boring and so artificial. He goes, listen, Dana, no one's above the law. But then goes on to say that Trump shouldn't be held accountable, and it's just, it's so, it looks bad for our country. No. See, as I said when I covered that video, it looks bad for our country that Trump committed the crimes that he did. It looks slightly better that he's actually being held accountable. It makes the fact that we had a former president who, while he was president and after, did the things that he did, a little bit less bad that at least the system's doing what it should and holding him accountable. It would look much worse if both we had that president and that former president who did the things he did, violated the law in the way that he did, and then wasn't held accountable. That's what would look bad.
That
Mike
would be
Pence.
profoundly embarrassing. That's the real banana republic stuff.
Yes.
This idea that if you have a political climate that creates these sort of bad faith politicians who so flagrantly violate the law and norms and institutions, that is embarrassing. That is a black mark on the face of your republic. But then you would allow it to fester and become necrotic if at the same time the rule of law, which you profess is above all others, above all politicians, above all policies, the rule of law, Constitution, if you don't have any sort of accountability. And I've mentioned this before in conversations I've had with you offline, and I've mentioned it in my own videos. It's so interesting to contrast the approach that the relatively, I don't want to say lethargic, but the slow pace, perhaps you would say methodical, but it's certainly been relatively slow. It's not been rushed. The pace at which the Justice Department here in the United States has pursued potentially indicting Trump, which they have now, compared to Brazil. Brazil, I love how they have responded to the Bolsonaro attempted insurrection at the beginning of January, where it was essentially their version of January 6th. They've already, it's been 5 months. They've fired people. People are under investigation. They've overhauled aspects of the military. The Supreme Court's involved. Bolsonaro himself is under investigation. It's being far more robust. So to your point, Luke, not only are we obligated to hold Trump accountable, I think other countries, even after all this, may say, you know what, United States, you in fact were too generous to the insurrectionists and the political minds behind it. You were too methodical, too lethargic. It would have been better to have been more robust and more expedient in your pursuit. I think that might be a criticism that this country gets, 5-10 years down the road.
And because they're constantly, I agree with you on everything you just said there, because they're constantly bringing up Hillary within the context of these conversations for some reason, and Biden and all of that, even though the situations don't even compare. But let's play that out. Imagine if Hillary Clinton had nuclear capability documents that she mishandled like this. The right wing would have exploded and would still be exploding to this day about it. But we'll end with Trump on a very hopeful note saying this.
And right down on the sidewalk, everybody's being murdered and beat up and mugged. We're not going to let it happen. Thank you very much, everybody. It's a great honor to be here. Thank
you. Everyone's being murdered. Thank you. Have a good day.
What was that?
That's it. And by the way, and you can close with this, Jessiah, on this speech, you mentioned during a recent video, very aptly, I might say, oh no, you've frozen on us. Jessiah.
Yes, I froze. No.
All good. If you come back in, It'll be good. One of the things Josiah, while he's getting it back up and running, mentioned in a past segment is actually, as we enter into this year, we're seeing predictions of, expectations of, there you are, you're back, a sharp decline in crime based on the early indications and statistics we have as of now. And it could be a historic drop in crime after, admittedly, a rise nationwide in red and blue areas because of the conditions that the pandemic caused and the economic downturn and all of that. But now we might see, under Biden's watch, a very sharp decline.
Yeah. So interesting. So the first thing is, like you said, and I did cover this in a previous video, that the alleged facts that Trump is citing are simply not true. Preliminary data from the first 5 months of the year show, particularly with violent crime, particularly murder, we are seeing a potentially historic level of decline. Number one, so he's wrong on the facts, but it's Trump. We always expect him to be wrong on the facts. He is anti-fact. But why on earth, how on earth, just rhetorically speaking, like, why do you end a speech that way? Like, I don't, you're supposed to end you know how most presidents or former presidents end speeches, political speeches, God bless you and God bless the United States. I wonder if now that's going to be like the ending, like the conclusion to every presidential speech in the future. Everybody's being beaten up. Everyone's being murdered. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Yes, it's so bizarre.
Thank you so much for watching. For the outro on this video, I want to plug Josiah's channel. Hit them with it, Jesiah.
Hey, everybody. I appreciate you watching. You can find me at youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics. One word, pondering politics. If you like progressive commentary that focuses on coalition building with other elements of the left and calling the Republican Party out for what it's become, I hope you'll view my channel. Give me a like and subscribe and some feedback. Again, youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics. Thanks again.